Try to remember your first birthday. Try harder, there is nothing there. No cake, no candle, no faces leaning in to sing. You were alive. You were aware. You were forming thoughts, feeling hunger, feeling comfort, and yet none of it survived. This isn't a flaw in your memory. It's a feature of how you became a person at all. Every human on earth shares this gap. Scientists call it infantile amnesia. It's not that babies don't remember things. It's that the adult you grew into cannot reach back and retrieve what the baby you once knew. Something happens between the ages of 2 and 4 that seals off almost everything before it. And for over a century, nobody could agree on why. Sigmund Freud was the first to name the phenomenon back in the early 1900s. He thought the missing years were repressed on purpose, buried because of desires too uncomfortable for the conscious mind to hold on to. It was a strange theory. It was also, eventually, proven wrong. Modern neuroscience tells a much stranger story than repression ever could. Here's what's actually happening inside a baby's skull. The hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for stitching moments into long-term memories, is still under construction. Think of it less like a filing cabinet and more like a library being built while the books are already arriving. Shelves aren't finished. Catalog systems don't exist yet. Some books get placed. Most get lost in the renovation. Psychologist Carolyn Rowe Collier spent decades studying infant memory using a strange but brilliant setup. She tied a ribbon from a baby's ankle to a mobile hanging above the crib. Kick your leg and the mobile moves. Babies as young as 2 or 3 months learned this fast. They remembered the connection for days, sometimes weeks. So infants do form memories, real ones. The problem isn't storage. The problem is retrieval years later by a brain that has completely rewired itself. And that rewiring is dramatic. In the first few years of life, your brain produces far more neural connections than it will ever need. Then it starts pruning aggressively. Synapses that aren't reinforced by repeated use get cut away, like a gardener cutting back everything that isn't blooming. The memory network you had as a 1-year-old gets pruned along with everything else. It isn't that the memories were weak, it's that the entire neural architecture holding them was torn down and rebuilt into something new. There's also the matter of language. Before you could speak in full sentences, you experienced the world in a completely different format. Feelings, sensations, fragments without narrative. Once language arrives, memory starts organizing itself around words, timelines, cause and effect. Psychologist Patricia Bauer, who has spent her career mapping how memory develops in early childhood, found that toddlers can recall specific past events, but only for a short window, before those memories fade beyond recovery. Her work shows that memory in early life isn't absent. It's simply unstable, still learning the rules it will later depend on. So somewhere around age 3 or 4, a strange handoff happens. You go from a creature who experiences without narrating to a person who experiences and immediately turns it into a story. Once that shift happens, memories start to stick the way you know them now. Everything before that shift is written in a language your adult mind never learned to read. Here's where it gets stranger. Memory researcher Endel Tulving drew a sharp line between two kinds of memory. Semantic memory, which is just knowing facts, like your birthday or your mother's name. And episodic memory, the kind where you mentally travel back and relive a moment, seeing it from the inside. Babies build semantic knowledge constantly, faces, voices, routines, but episodic memory, the kind that lets you say, I remember standing there, feeling that, requires a fully developed sense of self. A baby doesn't yet have a stable I to attach the memory to. Without a narrator, there's no story to save. Isn't that strange to sit with? You existed before you had a self to remember yourself with. This is why so-called first memories, the ones adults swear are real from age 1 or 2, are almost always reconstructions. A parent tells the story enough times. A photograph gets studied enough times. The brain quietly stitches together a memory that feels first person but was actually built second hand out of other people's retelling. You didn't lie. Your brain just did what it always does. It filled in a gap with the most convincing available material. And this reveals something bigger about what memory actually is. It was never a recording device. It was never meant to preserve your past with perfect fidelity. Memory exists to build a self that can plan, predict, and survive tomorrow using yesterday's lessons. The infant brain wasn't ready for that job yet. It was busy doing something more urgent, wiring itself to see, to hear, to bond, to trust, because memory could wait. Survival could not. Think about what your earliest years actually built, even without leaving a single memory behind. The way you attach to people you love. The way your nervous system learned whether the world was generally safe or generally threatening. The way your voice learned its first rhythms, long before your first word came out clearly. None of that required conscious memory. It required only experience, repeated enough times to shape a brain that was still soft, still forming, still becoming you. So maybe the years you can't remember weren't lost. Maybe they were converted into something more useful than memory, into temperament, into instinct, into the quiet, wordless sense of who you are before you ever had words to explain it. Every time you comfort a crying child without thinking, every time a familiar smell pulls up an emotion you can't quite place, every time you trust or distrust someone for reasons you can't articulate, some of that root system reaches back further than memory can follow. You're not broken for forgetting your first years. You're standing on top of them. Try to remember your first birthday again. It's still gone. But now you know why. Not because it didn't matter. Because it mattered too much to be left as memory. It became you instead.